Hello, hello.
Hello. How's it going?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm happy that you're with us today for our fourth episode of our podcast. There are already people watching us live, so I just want to thank them for being with us today. We do our episode a bit later today since you had to work on Saturday morning, which is which you will tell us more about later. Yeah, so for everyone who is watching us for the first time, this is the I Love Veterinary Podcast, and we started doing this a month ago, and we already had three successful episodes and three interesting conversations with veterinarians and vet techs. Yeah, so today we have Dr. Shiloh Landskov, and I will give the word to you so you can introduce yourself for the audience, and then we can go on with some interesting questions.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh Landskov. Depends on where I'm working or who's addressing me, but I either go by Dr. Shiloh or Dr. Landskov. But I am a 2020 graduate from the University of Illinois, and I'm a DVM, so Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. And I started off in emergency medicine. I did not do an internship, but I feel like graduating into a pandemic felt kind of like an internship in and of itself. And then I transitioned after about a year into general practice. So I've done about half and half of my career. So that thus far, all 2 years of it, half ER, half general practice. And I also do relief work on the side. So I still do emergency and urgent care work on the weekends and just to get more experience. So my main interests are basically in urgent care or emergency, and I really like procedures like surgery. But I'm really liking general practice as well, just for getting to know my patients and getting to see them back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds amazing. So, tell us about where did you study? Tell us about your university. If someone watching us wants to start veterinary medicine, is it the place to start?
Yeah, so I had to do 4 years of undergrad and then 4 years of veterinary school. I went to a private liberal arts school in Minnesota for my undergraduate degree, and I really enjoyed that aspect of just becoming well rounded and getting a degree that was focused in science, but I still got to take classes like ancient Greek history and Renaissance art
Mm,
and just things like that that really helped me to be better, you know, I gained more knowledge about the world and not just hyper focusing on veterinary medicine. And I think that was super important in gaining entrance into vet school. I did feel that my interviewers definitely valued that part of my education. And then I went to veterinary school in the University of Illinois, which is just 2 hours south of Chicago. So it was not in a city, it was
I
actually in a
think we
very
lost you for a second.
Oh, okay. Can you see me now, or am I still
Yeah,
frozen?
you can continue now. I think now is good.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So
Your University of Illinois.
I went to the University of Illinois. It's about 2 hours south of Chicago. So it's in a really small town, but it's a college town. So they still had, you know, places to go, but it was just a very small town feel. I really enjoyed my school. Again, they did value having well rounded students, and there was a lot of opportunities for different club activities. I was really interested in wildlife medicine because we were able to really take on our own cases and kind of be the doctors in the situation. And then I was also heavily involved in the Veterinary Business Management Association. I was on
Mm-hmm.
the national board, and I just put a lot of value in knowing your worth and knowing how a business works, because a lot of veterinarians actually want to own a clinic. And so that's where you can kind of prep yourself before graduation for that. But I just felt like my school definitely focused on preparing you as a whole, and not hyper
Mm-hmm.
focused on just the medicine, but just communications and the whole package of being a vet, because it's not just
Yeah.
going into the room and doing your medicine and walking out. There's a lot more to it.
Exactly. Yeah, I think some people miss that these days, but I'm really glad that universities started doing that as well, like doing classes like that or some subjects, communications, business, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what gave you the push to become a vet? You mentioned like before we started the podcast, you mentioned that you've been surrounded with animals your whole life, but what exactly gave you the push to start it?
Yeah, I grew up loving animals, mainly due to I watched the Animal Planet, the Crocodile Hunter. I'm not sure if you watched that as a kid, but I idolized the Irwin family, I guess, in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Just conservation medicine, just treating animals with respect. But I never really knew I wanted to be a veterinarian until I was about 17 or 18. I had already picked the school I wanted to go to for college, and my parents decided that they were empty nesters and they wanted to get a dog, and that was honestly our first dog that I'd been really exposed to, and it just kind of popped up in my head like, oh, I know what I want to do now. I think I could actually work with animals, and I love them so much, and uh it I didn't really know what I was getting into, but over time it
Mm-hmm.
really was solidified the more and more I was shadowing vets and just learning more about the profession. So I'm not the typical veterinarian who, was 2 years old and knew what I wanted to do when I grew
Mm-hmm.
up. I just had all of these interests. I love science, I love medicine, I loved animals, and then I finally put it all together that I could do something with that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Usually people who want to become a vet when they're two or really young, they don't actually know what it is to be a vet. And it's much better when people decide after, like when they're actually exposed to science and medicine and had some practice or had the opportunity to shadow vets. Yeah, that's when you actually know. I know a lot of colleagues of mine when I studied dropped out even in the first semester because they actually didn't know what they were getting into. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just going to comment. I still didn't even know everything I was getting into until I got to actually vet school. Like you learn so much more once you're actually in vet school, but it's hard to really gauge until you're there sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So after graduating, you said you worked as an emergency doctor. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, so when I graduated, I had like a veterinarian job at a general practice, and then the pandemic kind of became more of an issue in the United States at
Mm-hmm.
that time, pretty much in like March, April of 2020. And
Mm-hmm.
my offer was rescinded. They told me that they were too uncertain about the pandemic. They thought they were going to have to close down their clinic. A lot of clinics did have to close down just because either their workers were too sick, or they had
Mm-hmm.
COVID, or they were just
Yeah.
afraid of what was to come, where they were just rescinding offers, lowering salaries, kind of preparing for the worst. But then I feel like we just didn't realize that veterinary medicine was actually going to start booming, and we would need more vets, and they would need to be paid more, not less. And you know I
Yeah.
think everyone was just so scared, so I ended up having to scramble to find a job, and there's an ER clinic down the street that they were open to mentoring a new graduate. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just got thrown into ER medicine, but in the best way possible. I had a really great mentor, and he basically, was there with me for every case for the first 3 months, and was there
Mm-hmm.
to kind of say, you did this well. I would have asked this question. So, and I recommend doing this treatment or this, he was just there to like kind of helped me through each case while still letting me be the primary doctor. So after about 8 to 10 months of that, I decided that I would like to move back home to Minnesota. Now that I've got my footing, and I really enjoyed ER medicine a lot more than I thought I would have. I was really scared because I did not prepare for an emergency medicine career, and then I ended up falling in love with it. So, everything happens how it's supposed to happen, I believe. I'm not saying that a pandemic is a good thing, but I like to look at the silver lining that I never would have found my love for ER medicine without, just the circumstances and how they occurred. But I did end up taking a general practice job when I came back to Minnesota, and I end up being hesitant at first because I was used to the ER aspect of things, but I ended up feeling really comfortable in general practice because of my experience in ER and just how fast-paced the pandemic made my first job. So I feel like it really prepared me for the sick appointments and the worst case scenarios. Then I could sit there and focus on okay, what vaccine schedules do we do, and what dewormers do you use for what, and the stuff that you would think a new grad would be focusing on first.
Yeah.
Not because I was like, oh, if a broken leg comes in, I'm not worried. But if a puppy comes in with worms, I don't know what to do. So it's just kind of a weird backwards experience that I had. But I'm kind of glad, that I was able to just, everything was really hard, but I grew a lot in the process.
Yeah. Usually it happens, as you said, the other way around. First, they give you the easy tasks like the vaccines and the deworming. But yeah, it's interesting that the way you did it. So probably you have much more confidence now, like a new veterinarian. I mean, you're not so new anymore, but after those emergency hours, probably even more. Yeah. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone who is watching us, you can ask us questions at the end, and Dr. Shiloh will answer. My next question is actually the theme of our talk today is why is diagnostic medicine so crucial during a pet's visit? Why do you think so? And how would you convey this to the pet owners?
Yeah, definitely. And so kind of going back to my experience starting out in ER medicine, just if you're watching this and you're a new graduate or you're even a vet student, something that my mentor said that you would think is just very common sense, but it really helped me is I was just getting so frustrated or flustered in the moment. I was like, okay, I'm going to call them. Their dog is vomiting and diarrhea. I don't know what's wrong, and what if they ask me questions that I don't know the answers to? And honestly, my mentor just was like, Shiloh, there's two things that you can start out with, blood work or x-rays. And sometimes you can do both. Other times you can use experience that you don't necessarily have right now, but eventually you'll have experience to pick what you think would be most important. But honestly, if you are able to at least just get some information, that is so valuable. Even if the blood work is normal, you can say it's not kidney disease, it's not liver disease, it's not, the value of it is to convey to the pet parent that you hope it's normal, but if it's not, that it could at least point us in a direction. So it's so difficult when they come in with their sick pet and they want you to just look at their pet and tell them exactly what's going on, which sometimes we can, but the value of diagnostic medicine is, if it's vague symptoms that, diarrhea can be caused by so many things, vomiting could be caused by so many things, but at least if we do this one diagnostic, like x-rays, then we can say, oh, I don't see a rubber ducky in the stomach, there's not a giant tumor or a bladder stone, or, it just depends on what your focus of the visit is. But I like to convey to pet parents that it's more so just to confirm and get peace of mind that there's nothing abnormal there. So I feel like the biggest thing to let people know is that I don't want to find something in the diagnostics, but it's helpful when we find something wrong. But I feel like every time I'm like, oh, the blood work's normal, sometimes people are like, oh, darn it. And I'm like, I know it doesn't tell us exactly what's wrong, but it gives us a peace of mind. And I personally think diagnostics are so important to tell us it's not XYZ or it's not that, because if there's something huge jumping out at us, it might be fixable, but it might be something super scary. And if we're not seeing something super scary, that's not a bad thing. So I just like, a lot of people, like even today, this morning, one of my clients said, well, what would you do if it were your dog? Would you do the blood work? And I'm like, that's not a fair question, because and we always want more information. But do I think that, your pet is stable enough to maybe try some treatment first? Sure. But me and my science brain, like diagnostics are just super important to get that peace of mind. Even if I think it'll be normal, I want to confirm
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. It's better to exclude the scary things at first, and then you can take it easy and start with some treatment. But yeah, I think it's also important to with diagnostic tests. Usually, as you said, you exclude things. You say this, it's not this, it's not this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
So yeah.
also, for just kind of relating it more to a general practice and like a preventative
Mm-hmm.
medicine standpoint, we like to get annual blood work, because that's a starting point for us. It's a snapshot in
Mm-hmm.
time to where if they are sick, we can compare, we can test again and then say, oh, this blood value was this number 6 months ago. It's a drastic climb. They're 10 years old and we know that this happened within 6 months. But if they've never had blood work until they're a senior, then we don't know if this has been happening over 10 years or 10 days. So it's super important, in my opinion, to get blood work every single year. Even if your pet is only like 3 or 4 years old, it's a really good idea
Mm-hmm.
just to get a baseline. And then when they get older, I mean, say you have a golden retriever who is 7 years old, maybe 8 years old, and I'm not going to argue if my pet parent comes in for an annual and just wants me to do, a chest x-ray or an abdominal x-ray, just as a general, like, snapshot in time, a picture of what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, because our physical exams are super valuable and they are a diagnostic tool, but we can't see and hear everything that's happening, and it's always good to just check in on their overall health, because they can't tell us that their tummy hurts unless
Yeah.
we go look in their, there's just, I think that it's never wrong to do a test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my next question is, how easy it is to convey this to the pet owners? Like, do they accept it easily when you ask them to do a blood work or an X-ray or any other diagnostic test?
Yeah, I think it heavily depends on the owner. And when they come to the ER, they're usually expecting me to recommend some sort of testing. When they come in to a general practice, they made an appointment. It's not a super
Mm-hmm.
rush, but if I'm seeing something on their physical exam that's super concerning to me, sometimes it can be really difficult to convey the level of urgency in really knowing, like I said, either excluding, like ruling out bad things, or
Mm-hmm.
confirming something that I suspect. So I do feel that if the expectations of the pet owner when they come into the appointment are not aligning with what I'm seeing going on, that is when it's a little bit more difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
communication, like we had touched on earlier, is super important, because if I can't convey to them the level of concern I have, then they're not going to be concerned. Vice versa, if they're not able to express to me what's going on at home or their level of concern, then I might even not even suggest a diagnostic that maybe they wanted to do, or that, we just have to be on the same page. And that can be really difficult
Mm-hmm.
when that part is not in alignment, or even sometimes we have like language barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be hard to convey the importance of diagnostics, or really anything like preventative, like vaccines, or prevention of ear infections and allergies and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
if we're not able to really touch base on what we both want to convey.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, as you said before, communication with pet owners is really important, but sometimes it can be really difficult.
Mhm.
And yeah, okay, so my second to last question for you. As a busy new veterinarian, as you said, uh, what do you like to do in your free time, if you have any? Like,
Yeah, I've already mentioned that I do relief work on the side. So when I'm not doing my main job or relief work, I do like to, I have a house, but it's definitely like a renovation project. So
mm-hmm,
me and my husband and I are constantly working on ways to improve our house, and then also currently knitting a large blanket. It's just
mm-hmm,
mainly, I like to be
nice.
at home, but I like to still, you know, stay busy. But I do like to relax my mind. So things like knitting,
Mm-hmm,
or where my mind can just kind of you know, relax. But I also just like to, hang out with friends and family. And I
mm-hmm.
have 5 animals, so I have to hang out with them too. But mainly it's just like taking care of my mental health and physical health outside of work the best I can, and trying to set those boundaries of trying to leave work at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the last episode, we mentioned how important are the boundaries and setting them, and yeah, being with good mental health,
Hmm.
especially in this profession, it can be really difficult some
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, and sometimes I do, tie the two together by,
Mm-hmm.
another hobby is like my social media a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll make videos to help educate, or just funny videos for vet professionals on social media. So that's a smaller part of my hobbies, but it is something that I do find to
Mm-hmm.
be rewarding, to connect to people. On
Yeah, and yeah, so can you tell us where can people find you on social media? Like, what's your Instagram or TikTok or Facebook?
Yeah, I mainly am on TikTok and Instagram, and so my
Mm-hmm.
username is Doc Shiloh DVM with underscores between the Doc
Mm-hmm.
and Shiloh and DVM. So yeah, if you search Doc Shiloh DVM, you'll probably find me, because there's not a lot of Shilohs in the veterinary profession right now. So
Okay. Yeah, sure. We enjoy your videos, of course, on TikTok and Instagram. So it's always nice to see something new. Yeah, so let's see if we have any questions from the audience so far. Um, I don't see any. So at this point, I think we're good and ready to finish this episode. Thank you again for joining us today. It was really fun talking to you and learning about why diagnostic medicine is so important these days. I mean, in general, in veterinary medicine.
mhm. Yeah, thank you
Uh,
for having me.
Of course, you're welcome. I think we can do another talk sometime in the future and see how it goes with your work and what else happens in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay, so I will end this podcast with just saying that see you next Saturday at 12 p.m. EST. And yeah, we will have another guest with interesting questions and interesting conversation. Thank you all and see you on Saturday. Bye bye.